Okay, so here we are with a quick preview look at the Milviz F4U Corsair. Strictly speaking, what this is an FG-1D Corsair. There were lots of different designations of the Corsair depending on which company built it. The Chance 4 company that designed the Corsair, those ones were typically called F4Us or whatever, with a designation letter after them. The ones that were built by Goodyear were FGs, and ones that were built by Brewster were F3s. So this Milviz have modelled this on an existing aeroplane, and that was a Goodyear-built one, so it was an FG. So the designation for this, when you buy the product, is the FG-1D. Now, this costs $39.99. It was released today, April the 1st, as I'm recording this. $39.99, which in UK money, because I'm in the UK, translated to about 29 quid. So it's actually not bad value, especially when you look at how lovely this thing is. It's got a load of really great paint jobs with brilliant texturing on them, and the modelling is fantastic. The detail levels are amazing. Now, the paint job that I'm using here is one for VMF-214, which was a US Marine squadron in World War II, and perhaps the most famous Corsair squadron of them all, in that it was the one which was led by Gregory Pappy Boyington, who I'm sure you've heard of if you ever watched the Black Sheep TV series or movie. He was a pilot that flew with the Flying Tigers in Curtiss P-40s before the US were in the war, flying for the Chinese, and then he rejoined the Marines and led VMF-214, which was called the Black Sheep Squadron. Not originally called the Black Sheep Squadron, originally called Boyington's Bastards, but not a very PR friendly name, so they came up with the Black Sheep Squadron, which is the nickname for that squadron now. So this is a Corsair of VMF-214. Now I'm going to switch to the drone camera view, and so that you can see the level of detail on this thing. I think you'll agree that the texturing and modelling on this is fantastic. An interesting thing to note is if you look on the underside of the wing here, where I'm moving my mouse around, you'll see that there is a lot of rippling and denting on the underside of the wing, and there's also a lot of rippling and denting here, and that is a feature of the real Corsair, because unlike a lot of aeroplanes built and designed in 1940 when the Corsair was originally designed, although it used aluminium panels on its skin, unlike most airplanes at that time which used flush riveting, the Corsair used spot welding. And if you know anything about spot welding, if you've ever looked at spot welding on your car, when the spot welder stamps down, it puts little creases in the metal, so it puts little dents where the spot welds have occurred, and you can see that on here, which is really good attention to detail. Another interesting feature of the Corsair, when it was originally designed, even though it was designed as a Navy fighter, initially Navy pilots were having difficulty landing the thing on carriers because it would have to come in at about 75 miles an hour, and if you throttled it back, one of the wings would stall before the other one if you gave it a burst of power, because there was a really powerful engine that had caused a torque roll, which had put a rolling motion on it, and one wing would stall before the other, which led to a lot of crashes. So what they added to later models of the Corsair was this thing that I'm waving my mouse around, which was a little stall strip, and what that did was it broke up the airflow at lower speeds so that this wing would stall at the same speed as that wing, and that enabled pilots to land it on the carrier a bit more safely. The other problem was carrier pilots were used to coming in straight on the stern of the carriers, because there were straight through deck carriers in World War II, but the Royal Navy pilots who were using the Corsair developed using curved approaches. That was a system that the US Navy Marine pilots and what have you also adopted, because the Corsair has a really long nose. One of the features that they added to later models was to not put cooling fins on this part of the cowling to improve your view, because of this long nose and this really massive engine. 2,000 horsepower engine, Pratt & Whitney R2800, which was the same engine used in the P-47 Thunderbolt. Difference between the P-47 Thunderbolt and the Corsair: P-47 Thunderbolt used a lot of turbochargers. The Corsair only had a supercharger on it, so it wasn't quite as fast as the P-47 Thunderbolt, but they were both really robust fighters. Now obviously you can see that this thing has its wings folded because it was a Navy fighter, even though far many more marine squadrons used the F4U than carrier-based squadrons. So there were quite a lot of Corsairs that were built that didn't have an automatic wing folding system that's to reduce the weight, because they didn't need to fold the wings. But this is a Navy version that does have the powered folding wings, and obviously we need to fold the wings down to have a go at flying this, because you want to see what it flies like and you want to hear what it sounds like. Anyway, so let's get in the cockpit. Now, in order to fold the wings, although you could fold the wings manually on a Corsair, there was a powered system to fold them, but you need the engine running to do that. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get the engine running. Now, I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to work out that this is a really, really beautifully modelled cockpit. It's absolutely fantastically textured. I would go so far as to say that this could very possibly be the nicest Microsoft Flight Simulator plane you can get in terms of modelling and texturing. Milviz have done a really, really great job on this. And it's not just the texturing and the model that's great, the sounds are great as well. Listen to this. I'm going to move the stick from side to side. Can you hear that? That sort of like clanging noise that you get in the real thing when you bang the stick about and what have you. So the sounds are really good on this thing as well. Now this is the wing folding mechanism here, but we'll need power to get this thing going. Now just before I start the engine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick back on the external view and swing this round, and you'll see that we've got 3 drop tanks on the thing. If I want to get rid of those, I can do. We can simply get rid of the fuel out of those, and they're gone, which means that you can configure this thing on the fly if you want. You can drop them in flight if you like, but you can do that on the fly in the sim, rather than, you know, oh, well, I loaded up my flight, I'll have to reload another flight. So that's great. There's all kinds of stuff for dropping ordnance and what have you. Now, so we need to start this thing up. Now, because we're going to be taking off in this thing, and this thing had a 2000 horsepower engine, Pratt & Whitney R2800, it developed a lot of torque. So when you take it off, you need to use the elevator trim, the rudder trim, and the aileron trim. And the recommended settings are there, which is 6 degrees of right rudder, 6 degrees of down right wing aileron, and a couple of degrees of nose up trim on the thing. So you can see I've got those dialed in there, but it tells you what you need. Now obviously to start it, we need the mixture control on. This is the supercharger control. We'll have a go at that when we get in the air. And there's the throttle. So we make sure those are on. We make sure we've got the main tank selected, because we got rid of those drop tanks. We make sure that we've got the magnetos on, and then we come over the other side. Almost all of this stuff is clickable and works. So you can see pitot heat there, and turning the battery on and off and what have you. So we want the fuel pump on, we want the instruments on, we want to prime the engine. We need to make sure that the cooling flaps are all open, because the engine's going to get hot, and then we're going to click the starter, and I'll go on the external view for this so you can hear it start. Now I've got the sound turned down on this thing, so it's not deafening you, but rest assured that that is a fantastic engine start sound, and when I get this in the air and throttle it up, I'll put you on the external view and you'll see exactly what I mean. The engine sounds on this thing are fantastic. So we've got some power, so now what we can do is we can put the wings in the flight position. Now because we've got the engine running, we don't need the fuel pump on anymore, and we don't need the primer on, and we can close the starter cover if we want to. So let's come back here like this, and we'll put the wings on spread, and this is the thing to lock them. So I'll do that, and we'll go on the external view so you can see the wings folding, and there we go, there they are folding, and they'll go down into that position there, and once they're down, we'll pull that thing up to lock them into the spread position so that they don't fold up while we're flying. So there we go. Now all of this, like I say, practically every switch in this thing works. So I'm going to get some of these things on for releasing, and what you'll see from that is you can turn the gun sight on and you can increase the brightness of it and all this sort of thing. So if you want to fly up behind your friends and start making daka 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 noises, you can do that. So you can see I'm rolling the mouse wheel to get that. Now this thing also models engine damage. If you overheat the engine, you can see the temperature gauge there, cylinder head temperature gauge. If you overheat the engine on this, it will seize the engine and it will throw oil all over the windscreen, and you will have no engine, and you'll also have a bit of difficulty seeing where you're going. But of course you can open the canopy and look out through that, and here we go. I'll close the canopy like that, and you can see that it goes, well, you can hear that it goes quieter when we close the canopy, but you can also hear that the sounds of closing the canopy are really good. So this thing has fantastic sounds, fantastic looks, fantastic modelling, fantastic texturing and what have you, and when we get it in the air, fantastic sounds from the engine. So let's get this thing going. So we'll release the parking brake. Get this thing turning. Obviously it's not a bad idea to get the stick back when you're taxiing this thing. You probably want to see it from the external view while I'm taxiing this thing, so let's get it in a slightly more cool view for the taxi, and away we go. Now with this thing having a simulation of a 2000 horsepower engine, there is a massive amount of torque from this thing when you power it up, so don't be surprised if you have to give it plenty of rudder and aileron, even if you have got trim dialed in on the control surfaces. We get this thing lined up on the runway. We are at Echo Golf Charlie Bravo, which is City Airport Manchester, otherwise known as Barton, which is one of the default airports. With a, see, you can get a bit steady on the brakes there, which is one of the default airports, and very pretty it is too, in real life as well. It's a great airport. It's just up the road from me. And up she goes. So we get the gear up. I'll go on the external view for that so you can see it. I'll come back on the engine a bit, and we'll also get the flaps up, which you can see are up. Now, as I say, you do have to watch that engine gauge there for the cylinder head temperatures, and you have to watch things like torque roll, because it would be very easy, if you were going too slow, to spin this thing. It will do in a dive about 550 miles an hour. I'm going to power this thing up and we'll go on the external view. I'm going to trim the nose down a bit. And then what I'll do is I'll play around with the throttle a bit. I think you'll agree that's got pretty fantastic engine sounds. Nice and manoeuvrable as well. Now, you saw me take that thing off, and you might have seen me giving it some rudder pedal and some ailerons and what have you. I made that look a bit easier than it actually is. Don't be surprised if you buy this thing to find yourself having 3 or 4 goes at taking off before you figure out where you've got to put rudder input in and what have you. And one of the things that you did notice, or you will have noticed, is that I didn't firewall the throttle. What I did was I took the throttle about halfway and got the thing sort of with a bit of momentum going down the runway, and then fed in the rest of the power. Not a bad thing to do. Now if you get this thing up high, there is a supercharger modelled on the thing there that you can pull in, which is the engine driven bit on the back of the engine that sort of like rams a bit more air into the thing and makes it a little bit more effective. So this thing is really, really fast and great fun. Anyway, oh, that's another thing you can notice on there. Unlike a lot of flight simulator aeroplanes, the lights on this actually do light up pretty well. I'm just going to take a look in the cockpit because I've got to keep an eye on that gauge there, make sure I'm not overheating the thing. Now, of course, one of the nice things about Flight Simulator is if you can't find your airfield, you can cheat and do that. So we can zoom out a little bit and we can see that there is the airfield. It should be just off our nose to the left a little bit. So we go on the external view. There you go, you can see the airfield. Now I'm very high for this landing, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come this way a little bit. I'm going to try and get some speed off, and we'll bring this thing in. Now of course one of the things I can do to bleed off speed is throw some flaps in and get the gear down. And you'll see that when you do that, things can get a bit draggy. In the grand tradition of piloting, I've lost sight of the airfield, so I'm going to do a bit of a cheat and check where it is, and it's off to my left. Now of course if I was really bringing this in for a landing and it was the real thing, I might get the canopy open. So we'll get the throttle back a bit. Oh, look at that. Almost like I was aiming for it. Now, one of the things that you might want to do with this is bring it in with a bit of a curved approach. But the other thing that you could do is you could side slip it. Going west here. Whoa. There you go, that's another great noise that it makes. If you scrape a wing. Let's go and part this thing up. So we get the flaps up. Now that explains a lot. That was a tailwind landing. Try not to smash into that bonanza, shall we? Oh, bit heavy on the brakes. So of course what I could do, now I'm back on the ground. Is fold the wings up again. Don't have to, but it's kind of fun. And then of course what you do with the real thing is you'd let it cool down a little bit before you cut the power on it. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. So we'll chop the mixture and turn the fuel off. Kind of cool the way that comes to a halt, that prop, isn't it? So there you go, Milviz FG-1D Corsair, otherwise known as the F4U Corsair. $39.99, which is about 29 quid. You can get it from the Milviz website if you do a search for that. If you're not familiar with Milviz, M-I-L-V-I-Z, they make loads of really cool stuff. They've also got a couple of cool ones on the way. I'll let you go to the Milviz website and check them out, but they've got a couple of other cool ones on the way for Microsoft Flight Simulator. But this is certainly worth having because if you think about it, the average Carenado GA plane is about 24 quid. This is 5 quid more than that, and it is stunningly good, including engine modelling for damage where you actually have some consequences, and it's a real handful to fly, as you saw when I landed it. If you think my landing was bad, get hold of a copy of this yourself, see how well you do. But keep in mind that I did a pretty good takeoff there. Don't be surprised if it takes you a few goes to get this thing into the air. Notice an interesting thing there, that when the power's come off, the sort of flaps have drooped down and what have you as well. So there's all kinds of really cool things going on with this. And as I say, most of the stuff works. For example, the arrestor hooks and things like that, if you want to do carrier landings and what have you, and the external tanks if you want to do long range things. And an interesting thing worth noting, which I didn't point out here, but you can do it, is if you've got keyboard shortcuts for an autopilot, or you've got a hardware autopilot, even though the real thing doesn't have an autopilot, you can still use the autopilot of the sim to fly it, so you can fly it hands off. So good if you want to go on their external views and not worry about flying the thing. Although you did see there that as long as you trim it well with those little aileron and elevator and rudder trim controls there, it will fly quite nicely hands off. Do I recommend it? Yes, and yes, I am going to do a more detailed review for my channel. This was just kind of a quick look at it, if you wanted to check it out, because there have been a few previews of this on on YouTube and what have you from people who've got sort of like pre-release copies of it. I bought this, it wasn't a freebie, and this is the actual release version of it. So if you buy it, what you see here is what you're getting. And I think you'll agree it's pretty good. Anyway, that's it for this one. If you liked the stuff that I do, don't forget to hit that little subscribe button and check out some of the other videos on the channel. Anyway, that's it for now. Bye.